Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights and strategies. So sit back and relax, let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
So welcome to today's Business Women Australia podcast show. I'm Lyn Hawkins. I'm the founding director of Business Women Australia, and I'm streaming live to you from the beautiful lands of the Noongar Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and those emerging, and thank the First Nations people who have actually taught me a lot about the rich culture, the heritage, and the knowledge that they have about our lands for hundreds of thousands of years that have gone before us. So I'm delighted today to have the fabulous Nicola Watts on the show. We're going to delve into the topic of protecting legacy and love with binding financial agreements. Nicola is the managing principal of O'Sullivan Davies Family Lawyers, a leading Australian firm specialising in complex and high-value family matters. And she's my vintage. She has over 30 years of experience. She's trusted by individuals, by families navigating significant transitions. And she brings precision and empathy to her work, particularly with the binding financial agreements that she's helped and the estate planning and wealth protection that goes along with that. And you'll hear firsthand why I adore her, and she's very much loved in the Business Women Australia community for her thoughtful approach and her generous spirit of sharing her knowledge. She really is committed to empowering women to make confident, values-aligned decisions for themselves and their families. So today we're going to unpack this often misunderstood yet incredibly important role of binding financial agreements, BFAs, in protecting both legacy and love. Welcome to the show, Nicola.
Oh, Lyn, that intro is all a bit too much. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is quite exciting, quite a topic that I'm passionate about. As I told you before we started, I've just run back from the family court and I have to run back this afternoon. And so one of the great things about financial agreements is the plan is to keep people out of court, and that is where people need to stay away from. So this is a topic that people really need to know about and think about if it fits into their families.
Absolutely. And you sort of look at it as a potentially proactive values-based planning tool. I mean, just imagine if these agreements could support healthy relationships and bring more clarity and clear expectations, reducing that emotional impact that can often happen in families. Let's start with you though, Nicola. Tell us about your career. It's extraordinary and super, super successful career. There's been a lot of work and discipline that's gone to your work as a family lawyer and now as a managing principal of O'Sullivan Davies.
Thank you. Well, I suppose I stumbled onto family law. I was sort of forced into it, to be honest. I'm from Tasmania and I started my practice there. And on my first day, I was told by the office manager that I would have to refer to all of the partners by Mr. That I had to wear a skirt because I was a female. I wasn't allowed to wear trousers, and that I would have to do some family law because I was a girl. So that was my start to family law. I was always interested in working with people. I was never really interested in just doing commercial work or that sort of work. I wanted to work with people. At first I thought crime was my passion, and but after spending quite a bit of time in the lockup in the morning bailing people out, I realised crime doesn't pay, and it wasn't really my passion. So I was doing family law as part of my practice in Tasmania, and then I moved to Melbourne in 1997, and it was an easy transition just to move straight into family law, and I've practiced exclusively in it since then. The family family law is a national law, although we here in Western Australia have slightly different rules and a state court, but it is a national jurisdiction. So it has stood me well in that I left Melbourne in 2013 and moved here to Western Australia. So I've been practicing in this jurisdiction in 3 states, and so I know all about it, and I really enjoy it. And what I enjoy about it is actually sitting down with a person and working through their problems and trying to get to the end, and fixing things from them. And it's not a perfect jurisdiction; it's very emotional, but the work you can do before things go sour is will hold you in good stead if and when your relationship breaks down. And the point of a lot of financial agreements is, and I say to people, now you've signed it, put it in the bottom drawer, and hopefully you never have to pull it out, because they only take effect when people separate. So it's really, I suppose, like any other thing, like it's like life insurance in some ways. You only really need it if something goes bad. So that's why they're important, and that's why they should be seen as a commercial thing, not necessarily as an unromantic thing, but as something to protect you in the future.
So tell us, Nicola, what is exactly a binding financial agreement, and how is it different from like prenuptial agreements? I mean, we've seen all the American shows, we see the prenups being rolled out.
Yeah.
How
I suppose at the end of the day, there isn't really a difference. A prenup agreement is an American term, and it was, before marriage. Binding financial agreement, or financial agreement as we generally call them, has only been in Australia for, I'm going to say 20 years, but it could be 25, but a limited period of time. Before that, they weren't really worth the paper they were written on. And the jurisprudence with respect to financial agreements has grown through that 25 years. They're not called prenups because you don't have to do them before marriage. Most do, but you can also do them during marriage. And that is like during a healthy marriage, or at the end of a marriage before you divorce, or you can do them as a way of resolving matters at the end. So an after marriage financial agreement. And people who want privacy and don't necessarily want their financial information on a court file will often do a financial agreement at the end of a relationship. It's still just as binding as a court order if it's done properly, and then still needs to be the disclosure and the same amount of information, but you're giving it to each other rather than putting it on a court file. And whilst court files are, bound up in secrecy as well, a lot of high net worth people don't want anything to do with their families and their structures on a court file. So they're used at the end of the marriage, but most of them are before. And I keep on using the word marriage, but you can also have a financial agreement as a de facto couple before you start living together, during your relationship, or at the end. They're the same either way, slightly different in Western Australia to everywhere else, but not a difference that we need to go into today.
And I mean, the obvious question that I think a lot of our listeners would be asking, they're, women who are earning, big bucks in their executive roles and on their boards and, in their own careers. At what level of wealth is it worth having a binding financial agreement?
Well, I think you need to look, I suppose, at how the family court would divide up your assets if you didn't have it. So what the court does is it looks at contributions. And if one party comes in with a significant contribution and the other doesn't, if you're only in a 2-year relationship, the court will probably really regard that as a standalone contribution at the beginning, and it will give most of that back to the person who brought it in. But if you're in a marriage that lasts 20 years and one party's bringing in a big contribution at the beginning or inherits during the relationship, it loses its impact in the family court. It can't be put aside like you can in a financial agreement. A financial agreement is really saying, okay, I'm getting this as an inheritance or through a trust or from my grandparents or from someone else. And that was left to me, and it's nothing to do with my husband or my wife. I want to leave it over here. I want to leave it for my children. I don't want it to be divided up in my marriage. The family court throws everything into the pot, no matter where it came from and who earned it. And significant assets tend to decrease over time. The longer they've been in a relationship, there's some logic to that. Because, for example, if one party has a significant amount of money and they bring that into the relationship, as a couple, they'll make decisions based on that. They won't think about sending their kids to private school. They won't think about buying a bigger house or buying a beach house or going to Europe every year business class because they've got money. So at the end of a relationship, it's harder to pull it apart and see those significant contributions unless you agreed at the beginning and you agreed that that money from the family is sitting over here separate. So that's really the difference. And so if you're in a short-term marriage, it's not going to really be essential. We have a lot of people ringing up and they're young couples and I've bought a house, I put in a deposit of, $50,000 and I want an agreement. And it's like, you really don't need an agreement. Like, you really don't have enough wealth to justify a complex financial agreement. But if they say, look, I've just got a house, but I know that I'm going to inherit $10 million and my grandmother's really unwell, then they should have an agreement. So it's always going to depend on when the wealth is likely to come and how different the parties' respective positions are. But if one's got 50 grand more than the other and they're both earning an income, don't bother. The family court will treat you both well. But it's the differential ones that you really need to concentrate with your agreements, in my view.
So 1 in 3 marriages end in divorce. I don't know if these stats are still up to date or if it's even, I think it's less
more.
now. Yeah, more end in divorce. Yeah, I say less survive. And for de facto
that's right. Same thing.
Yeah, same different way. And for de factos, it's even higher. The average rate of divorce is apparently around the 45, mid-40s for women, or early 40s and mid-40s for men.
Yeah, that tends to be our clients. Those, often, 2 kids, primary school age, something along those lines. I mean, obviously people get divorced at all stages of life, and some do get, are only together for a very short period of time. But the complexity is when people have been together 10 years, they've got children, and if one particular person, if one has stayed at home and their career has been affected as a result of having kids, that tends to be a lot of the people that we see.
Yeah, and look, this intergenerational wealth transfer, we talked about this at a lunch recently, didn't we, around this expected $3.5 trillion transfer for families, and not many of them have put in place any protective frameworks.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of money, and it's causing a lot of angst. A lot of baby boomers have realised that they're not going to be here forever, and they don't want the money that they've worked hard and earned to be dissipated to, the wives and husbands of their children and their grandchildren. So we are getting more and more work in this field to work with commercial lawyers to look at protecting that wealth for further generations.
Yeah, it's a real rise of the family office. I can remember working in this space at, at the beginning a few years ago, and just in the last few years seeing so many families looking at how to set up a family group or a family office with all the structures to make sure that the needs of the core wealth are going to continue to grow, the corpus, and that the families can be sort of protected in terms of the grandparents and the parents' legacies for future generations.
Yeah, the problem is the wrong word, Lynn. I suppose you set up certain structures to be tax effective and to be protected from outside influence or to when you're being sued or anything like that. So there's a whole heap of corporate structures that people set up for different reasons. A lot of it is to do with tax. A lot of people set up trusts to distribute wealth amongst families and things like that. And that's, to maximize the benefits that they are under the law. But those people think, oh, all our money's in a trust, so it will be protected down the track. As I've told you before, and I've told many, many people, the family court is one of the, if not one of the most trying to
Can I
think of the
say
word.
invasive?
Evasive might be with a word,
Invasive.
but it's powerful. Powerful is going to be my word. I'm not going to call the court that I go to every day evasive. It's a powerful court. So what people don't understand is they can set up a trust or they can set up a corporate structure to protect assets from whoever they want to protect them from. But if the family court get a sniff that something has been set up to avoid a claim in the family court, so people will transfer money in their name into a company or a trust and think, well, ha 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 ha, it's over here, and I've made my mother the trustee of the trust, and the money I've put over there, I can't touch it. It's not mine anymore because I'm just a beneficiary of that trust. And the bottom line is, the family court can go, no, hold on. That's clearly a sham. Like you've set that up so in the hope that we can't get our little fingers on it. And the family court will go, no, we can completely unravel that. It happens. People sell properties. They sell a property that's worth $5 million to their friend for $2 million. And the family court can go, we'll have that back. So the people who set up things to avoid the family court at the end, well, they're not going to succeed, is the bottom line, which is why you go back to setting it up at the beginning, knowing that what is protected, how things are going to be. And so you don't have to try and be dodgy at the end because people do it all the time and they think that they're smart and so, oh, I've got no money, or it's in my father's trust and all the rest of it. And you go, well, except you put it there and the family court are going to get it back. So yes, the family court could be evasive, but powerful is the thing. And it's really, as I say, if they get a sniff that people have done transactions with business or corporate entities to simply avoid paying the ex-wife or ex-husband, people are going to really suffer as a result of it and have huge legal bills and probably cost orders against them. So that's not the way to go.
Well, listen in, tax lawyers, accountants, financial planners. This is important for you to hear this because you're advising your clients. Now, you're working with many clients navigating these complexities of family dynamics and high wealth, high amounts of significant wealth. What are some of the common misconceptions that you have come across about BFAs in these sort of environments?
Look, the common misconception is they're not worth it or they're not binding. Okay. And the bottom line is they are challenged all the time. And they are hard documents to do because they're looking at a crystal ball. Okay. We have to try and work out in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of marriage, what's going to happen? Are people going to have children? Are they going to get sick? Are they going to need extra support? Is someone going to end up, with dementia or things like that? We've got to try and come up with every solution. So they become complex. But the most important part of it is sitting down and people thinking, well, they're not really worth it, so why do it? Well, they are worth it. They might be challenged, but they're always going to be worth not having anything at all. Most of them, and as I said before, we've developed the law in relation to this. The court will try and set aside anything that is fundamentally unfair. And if people say, we're together 10 years and my husband gets nothing, zero, despite the fact working and despite the fact we've lived this life together, or my wife will get, 5% of my assets after 10 years, the court will go, this is just not fair. Binding financial agreement or financial agreements are based on basic contract principles. And in contract principles, you have to have disclosure. You have to ensure that there is no unfair undue influence. So saying to someone, I won't marry you unless you sign this agreement is undue influence. And so they have to be done properly with advice, and people need to know what they're giving up. So when I sit down with people, they go, well, they're unfair, and well, they might be unfair. People enter into bad contracts. You can enter into an employment contract and think, well, I'm worth more, but I want the job. Or you can buy a house and think that I've paid too much money. People enter into contracts that are not ideal for them all the time. There's always generally a winner and a loser in some sort of contractual situation. And a binding financial agreement is just another contract. So it might not be the best result, but the benefits you get is what the result is going to be at the end. And so you don't have to argue about it. You know what's going to happen. So it provides a level of certainty. So other than saying to people, oh, they're not worth it, they are worth doing. Because they show what people entered into. They showed the contract, what it was there for. People challenge contracts all the time, whether or not they be a building contract or a financial agreement. But people still enter into building contracts, and they should still enter into financial agreements. So really, if you see it as a contract to protect your interests, much like an insurance contract or a building contract or anything else, that's how it should be looked at, as a commercial deal. People say, of course, that's not very romantic. Well, I can tell you, fighting in the family court and waiting for years to divide up your assets is not very romantic either. A lot of people, the resources that they have personally are, that's what they've got. That's their biggest commercial decision. That's what they've built their assets on. And then they don't treat it commercially. They don't treat it like protecting it with insurance and all the other things, which in my mind, it doesn't really make sense. So it's like, if you've got wealth, protect it. And one of those things is to have all the trust that you were talking about, all the family office and all the rest of it. That trust lawyers and accountants, all the rest of it, certainly those are the people we need to be talking to. But when looking at the structures, they need to consider the family court and the financial agreements as well. It's just another brick in the wall, in my view.
It really is highlighting to me the importance of the whole communication piece. When you think about, well, what is the best time to raise this in a relationship? If you've got sons or daughters, or if you're entering a new relationship, at what stage do you bring it up?
Well, it's funny. I in a past life, when I lived in Melbourne, I acted for a few AFL footballers, and I remember having a conversation with one, and he said, "Oh, my wife would never come after my, premiership medallion or my football memorabilia. She's always said that that's mine, and she's proud of it." Of course she came after it. I'd go after it too if I was acting for her. In fact, famously, I was involved in a case on the front page of the Herald Sun when we went after a Brownlow. So people say things at the beginning of a relationship. People say, I would never come after your inheritance. Well, when they say that, you go, okay, well, sign here. Because people at the beginning, they know, they go, oh, I'm going to get some money from my family later on. And I can tell you, at the early stages, people will always say, oh, well, of course that's yours. I'm never going to go after it. But, 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track, things have changed. So early on, being really clear, and I think if you say to any new couple, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, most people will generally say, yeah, that sounds fair at the beginning of a relationship. So that's probably the time to have the conversation. And it can just be a general concept. It can be, look, my parents run their own business, or they have a farm or whatever. That in the future I'm going to get that. I don't know what I'm going to get, but it's going to come from them. And I'm not working on that farm, or I'm not in that business. Whatever I get, I'm not dealing with that at all. So it's going to be a benefit to us. I think most people accept that at the beginning of a relationship. So that's when it's time to have the conversation. Whether or not when you have it on the first date, or whether or not you have it before you get engaged, I'm no expert on that. That's probably the realm of a psychologist rather than a lawyer. But people have those conversations. They know each other's families. They go and visit their houses. They know there's money around on one side or the other. And as I said, they need to think about how they protect themselves in many different ways, and protecting themselves from a fight over assets at the end of a relationship is just a step along the way.
Yeah, I can see it'd be a lot easier to have this conversation if you are a part of a family group. I could imagine, like the example of an AFL footballer, or, someone that's individually, uniquely wealthy and have maybe come from a family that doesn't have wealth. It would be a lot harder, the conversation. It really, it's really interesting. Anyone who's tackled this and turned out that it has been a great experience discussing a BFA early in a relationship and it's been handled well, please DM me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I'd love to hear your story. And I'm sure there's some good ones. Because how could it possibly be something that brings harmony? You talk about it could support sort of emotional well-being and reduce strain. I mean, how is that possible? Because we're not a culture that talks about money like this.
No, you're right. And to be honest, it's a much easier conversation to have when one party has been married before, or has been through the family court, or their parents have been through the family court, and they can say it from personal experience, I don't want to go down that road. And to be honest, most financial agreements that we do are for people who are going second time round, who didn't do it the first time round, because maybe at the beginning they didn't have any wealth, and maybe they have developed that during the relationship, and then the husband or wife walks away with 50% or more or less of that, and they're starting again, and they go, I don't want to do that. So I think if you're talking about someone like a footballer or someone like that who's come from nothing and created their own wealth, it is a harder conversation to have. But the second marriage, I can guarantee they'll have one. But I think when you have that wealth at the beginning and it's recognizable, it's an easier conversation to have. And it can be a conversation. Blame your parents, blame anyone, blame your accountant. To say, my financial advisor tells me I have to have one of these. My parents have told me that they won't give us any money unless I have an agreement. I mean, people are going, they'll sign up. In my experience, why wouldn't you say, well, I might not get a share of that, but I get to live in a fancy house on the harbour, or in Toorak, or wherever you may be, and I'm in this marriage for life. I'm putting this agreement in the bottom drawer, so I get all the benefits of this wealth by agreeing to this right there and then. So I suppose, again, you've got to look at the commercial reality. Why would you turn down an inheritance and all the benefits of receiving that as part of a couple on the basis that sometime in the future I might separate and I won't get it then?
And what about, can it be revisited? I mean, I'm thinking of situations where it's all in the beginning of the relationship, you both got working, then you sign off your agreement, you have a baby, you can't work anymore, you give up your career. and all of a sudden, like this BFA is maybe not providing for you in the future if something goes
Yeah.
foul, because you might not have ever thought you were going to have a baby or give up your career. I mean, when I was at KPMG, I was never having children. I was going to be on these boards and do all these things, and children wasn't for me. Here I am 4 kids later, and I gave up my career for years, and I don't look at my super.
Yeah. So the simple answer to that is yes, you can amend these at any time. And a financial agreement can be for a period of time. So you might say, after our 10th wedding anniversary, this agreement it will no longer stand. You
Right.
can what is happening now, and I've seen this quite a bit, is the percentage that the other side is entitled to increases over time. So, if I'm together for 5 years, I don't get any of that money over there. But if I'm together 10 years, I might receive a payment of X or Y. Now, that, makes me worried that people stay in bad marriages. Yeah, but Lynn, we stay in bad jobs to get long service leave. Like we stay, like you again, it's a decision you make.
True.
Like we
I
people do
like
that.
that idea. I actually like that idea because I talk about the different stages of marriage. The businesswomen will laugh at me because I do talk about the different phases. You go through the honeymoon phase, and then there's the job sharing phase, and if there's kids, it's the parenting phase, and then there's the loathing phase, and then there's, if you can get through the loathing phase, then it's like the renew your vows phase, and then it's like, wow, I like you even more than I did when we first got engaged. But not many people get to that point because they usually give up during the loathing stage. But if
I specialize in the loathing stage. Obviously, I spend a lot of time there. But that's the thing about an agreement. You can structure it in relation to you get more if you have more children, or you're there together, or if you can also do it on a percentage of wealth. Like if, for example, you're expecting 10 million and then you get 100 million or something like that. These agreements are pretty flexible. I suppose, though, the problem is and we've talked about this before, the parents might not necessarily want to tell the child or the grandchild what they're likely to receive in the future. So so it becomes hard to talk about percentages and divisions and who gets what at what stage, unless you know exactly when you're going to get things. So, but what you can always do is you can exclude stuff. You can exclude everything. You can then put all of that aside. Everything I receive from my parents' trust or my parents or inheritance or anything is over here. What we build up as a couple is treated separately. And what we build up as a couple through our own work, through you working, through me not working, and all the rest of it is treated differently. And the person who doesn't work or the person without wealth may get all of that because they've left this over here. You can come up with these agreements to cater for every circumstance is the bottom line. And you can, as I said, you can do it for a period of time. You could do it, the percentages increase over time. You can do it that it terminates at a particular time, like 10 years we done, she can have half. 10 years, whatever the percentages change. I've seen them terminated. I've also seen couples come back. They've come back and they've said, look, we've thought about this. This isn't really fair. Can we adjust it? And that's happened. So, and I remember one a couple of years ago, I was acting for the husband. The wife was about to receive a significant amount of money from her family's trust. And the parties had already been married 20 years, but they signed a financial agreement then, which enabled her to get the money from the trust, them to have the benefit of the trust. And it was agreed that the husband wouldn't have any of that, but he was going to get the majority of what they'd built up in the 20 years previously. Now, that's an unusual case. And because often that doesn't happen, it's not as clear, but he was quite happy with that because he knew that had nothing to do with her dad. He knew that once that money came in, his children were going to have, they were all going to be looked after, all their uni fees were going to be paid for, he no longer had to pay for school fees. He knew that they could upgrade their house, they could buy a holiday house. It wasn't going to be his holiday house, but he got to go there and go surfing. So that was a commercial decision from him. And as far as I know, I haven't heard it, they're still together. That was, probably 8 years ago. So you can do them during the relationship if the dynamics change.
That's kind of like that's a really like a gift of love, that story. That's a really great example of, an absolute demonstration of, where you sit with, your feelings for someone too in that time when things are good. And as you say, that might be forever and ever after. So it's irrelevant. Have the agreement put in place. It might be something her parents really wanted to see happen. And
well, I think the parents did, because in that case, what had happened was, I think it was a brother or sister of hers had separated. Dad had given them lots of money, and that went out. Most of it went out the door. So Dad wasn't going to give this couple money without knowing it was going to his blood relatives, like his grandchildren, not the husband. As I said, they were still together, but my client, I think at first he was a little annoyed and a little bit, controlling father-in-law, blah 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 blah. But over time he worked out, as you say, this is why would I walk away from this?
This
is only a benefit. It's like free money.
I love that. I love it. Yeah, that's a great example. And so, what we could, we're sort of thinking about values and family values, and even different cultural views around things could probably play out in shaping an approach to a BFA, right?
Look, I suppose so. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of cultures have dowries or payments or things like that. I mean, money, I don't know, in Australia and I suppose Britain or wherever we've come from, it seems a impolite conversation to have about how much you earn and what you've got and all the rest of it. We all just sort of go, oh, so-and-so is wealthy, blah, 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 blah. We don't talk about it. A lot of other different cultures are very, very direct, very, very commercial, and so I think you're probably more likely. I mean, in the US, having a prenuptial agreement is that's what everyone has. Like, it's just a thing. In South Africa, they have they're called something else. So there is one, but before they've got to sign things before they sign up. I don't know if that's still the case, but I've seen enough of them in my time to know that before you got married in South Africa, you had to have some sort of agreement in relation to your finances. So different countries are used to different things. And I think that we just need to get on board with these agreements. And look, they are becoming more and more of a thing. As I said, 20 years ago, they weren't around, or 25 years ago. They're around a lot. I don't know how many are being drafted right now outside my door in my office, but there would at least be 3 or 4 being drafted right now in my office. So the commonality of them now, I think it makes it easier to have that conversation.
And look, with so many and so much experience that you're seeing across your desk with BFAs, what are the sorts of questions that your clients ask you? What do their advisors ask you? What are the common questions?
Look, it's really it comes on how we're going to protect this, how we're going to make it stand up. And at the end of the day, there has to be a level of fairness in it. The ones that we did at the beginning that the court had thrown out, which is you don't get anything, like any bad financial agreement, courts will challenge, agreements if they're unconscionable, or if they're just blatantly unfair, or there hasn't been proper disclosure, or there's been undue pressure. So the way to do it is to make sure that there's proper disclosure, it is not being done at the last minute. Like if someone came in to me today and said, I'm getting married in a month, draft me a BFA, I'd go away. There is no way that we're doing that now. You need to give everyone a right to get legal advice, to consider their position, and whether or not it's signed before the marriage or a month after or 2 months after, it's not really going to have an effect. It's still in place. And, if 2 months after they don't sign it, then you can end the marriage and won't affect your finances either. But it's, I mean, but it's all those principles. It has to be fair, and it might not be the maximum that people will get, but what the court won't have is at the end someone walking away with nothing. So they provided that people are looked after and it's fair, and what's fair in your marriage and what's fair in my marriage or the person down the road is going to be different in every particular circumstance. So you've got to look at each individual thing. So but trying to just prevent someone from getting anything is not going to work. And as I said, sometimes the easiest way is just to put one category of assets over here and say everything else that we do together as a couple will be divided under the Family Law Act, and just that's over there, or will be divided 50-50 or be divided 70-30 or something like that. And there's mechanisms as to who moves out of the house if they break up and all the rest of it. And this is over here, but all of this we're dealing with together. And that's generally how a lot of them are dealt with. We've got the family stuff is over here, but what we've done over here is ours to divide.
Yeah, well, that sounds very, very rational. It doesn't sound scary at all. So if we've got listeners here that are interested in, what are the first steps that they could take? So what advice would you give, particularly women who have significant wealth of their own or are likely to inherit it or come into wealth, maybe from the sale of a business? What advice would you give them?
Look, my advice is, and this is, of course, you're entering into a new relationship, and it's delicate. I get that it's delicate, but my advice is that uncomfortable conversation that you have might save you years of arguing in a family court, lots of time in offices like mine, and it will give you some certainty. It will be like your will. Everyone does a will. They don't want to die. Okay, they just want to know that when they do die, this is how it's going to work. I've got certainty. I know that my kids are going to be provided for, or I know that one's going to be excluded because there's something or other, or that they write down what they want, their wish list, and they put it in a will and they put it in the bottom drawer, and they're not going to pull it out again. That's for later. A financial agreement's the same. So it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but it has to be on the basis that the stats that you gave at the beginning, Lyn, 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 marriages or relationships break down. Okay. I'm coming into this because I want to be with you, but I'm also want to protect myself. And hopefully we never open this agreement. Hopefully we never have to work out who's going to sell the house or who's going to stay in it and what's going to happen. But having it in the drawer means that we don't have to have that argument. And I feel a lot of women go into relationships and, a lot of us, I mean, I let my husband looks after our finance. I don't pay the bills. I don't know what's going on. Of course I can, and I see them all. He just does that. He's an engineer. They like spreadsheets. That's what they do. So but at the end of a relationship, a lot of people are really vulnerable because they've handed over financial decisions to one of the parties, and they come out going, well, I don't even know 100% what I own, and I know I've got access to the bank accounts, but I still really don't know what we spend or what we do. And that's fair enough, because they've been doing other things. They could have been raising children or running their own business or doing that, and they feel really, really vulnerable at the end. But if they already know that they've got an agreement in place, that they're protected, and whatever wealth has been, they know that they're going to get a share of it, and they know that they're going to walk away with a home or walk away with enough money for a home, the vulnerability is going to go down. So I think it is a difficult conversation. I know it is. And as much as I'll talk about BFAs till I'm blue in my face and tell people should get them, particularly if they are going to inherit money or they have money at the beginning of a relationship, I'm not silly to say, oh yeah, it's an easy conversation to bring up. And that's why I go back to blame your accountant or your mother or someone else and just say, well, they've made me do it, or my best friends just talked about it. I mean, we all have difficult conversations, so but my advice is have that conversation. If someone says at the beginning or even, a year into a relationship and you say, I want a financial agreement to protect my business or my wealth, and they go, I'm not going to sign it, don't you have to think about whether or not you want to be in a relationship or not? Because if they're saying, well, no, I'm not prepared to give up my claim, I think you need to have a bit of a think about who that person is and whether or not you've got the same values. And again, that's hard, and I'm not a psychologist, and I know it's hard out there to find the right person. But if people aren't willing to look at the future and let you protect yourself, you've got to think about the relationship, I would have thought.
Well, that might be our next guest on the show later or early next year. Get a relationship counsellor and maybe a financial planner. We'll have a 4-way conversation around this because it is a really important topic. We can see a lot of women doing really well. I want to see women have these conversations about money, about protecting and growing their wealth, about making sure they're in a good position. Women are very vulnerable in this process, and not versing yourself in what the opportunities and the things are that are available to you is just sticking your head in the sand. So wake up, ladies, get involved and look at what's available to you to support and protect your wealth. Thank you, Nicola. It's been so good to have you on the show, and I know we've got to let you go so you can get back to court. Thanks for racing over for the podcast. We will have you back again next year. For those of you who are listening, drop me a line. Let me know, is there a family law topic that you would like us to bring Nicola onto the show, and we can pick her brains? We're very lucky to have her in our community. So thanks for listening. And if you aren't already a member of Business Women Australia, why wait? Join us. We're growing across the nation. We're in every state. We're women from every profession, every sector, leaders, emerging leaders, women on boards, executive, professional, entrepreneurs, founders, you name it. We're a mixed bag of bags, aren't we, Nicola?
We are, and what I really like about this group, Lyn, is that you have such a variety of different things. And I was saying earlier, I'm not really, and despite this, I'm sorry, listeners, I'm not really a big podcast person, but I really enjoy some of the lunches that you have. I really get a lot of benefit from some of the smaller groups, particularly working with finance and all the rest of it. Other people will prefer different things, and that's a really good thing about Business Women Australia. You can look at what's coming up and decide what suits you and what you can fit into your life, and be part of a community, which is it's just really interesting. So thank you.
It is. Thanks, Nicola. It's definitely a smorgasbord. You can pick and choose. So we'd love to see more of you. There's some great opportunities for those that join now. We're extending memberships through to January 2027 because we know that we don't do a lot over December and January. So why wait? Get involved and enjoy the end of year Christmas celebrations, whatever state you're in. Thanks, Nicola, for being on the show.
Thank you. Bye all.
You have been listening to the Business Women Australia podcast show. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights to empower you on your journey. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to stay updated in our latest episodes. And if you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join so that you can connect with a thriving community of inspiring women across Australia. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.